Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Well, we're continuing our Evil Elite series where I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes as the Great Awakening continues. So much news to get through again this week. And this week's top story was really these staged fake terrorist attacks in Australia. Now, you remember at the time I said that if history is anything to go by, these look like absolute staged events, and as always, used by the elite to push their agenda, create division and hate, and ultimately push through new laws to take away your freedoms. And this is exactly what happened in Australia, where we had a number of these events take place. They all got pushed through and, through the media as antisemitism, to push through these laws and that type of thing. And once again, we found out that there was no, radical Muslims involved or anything like that. And worse, even again, Albo actually came out and said he knew for some time that these so-called hate crimes were in fact just inside con job. So this is just insanity that this is all allowed to, and they're obviously not going to repeal these laws. This is exactly what happens. This is their playbook time and time again, but it's just amazing that so many people are waking up to this, and this news is finally getting out there through platforms with less censorship. So once again, we've got a New South Wales MP announcing that the Dutton government is calling a national emergency crisis to tackle anti-Semitism. Even after we know that all these recent things are staged, they're going to give millions of dollars to these communities and prioritise this over everything else that's happening in Australia that should be the priorities. Another big headline event was this public town hall meeting in Box Hill where people had bought tickets, and then they go there and we're told this is a Chinese event only, you're white or Caucasian, whatever, you're not allowed in, and police enforcing this. So once again making Aussies feel like they're not welcome in their own countries and creating this division. And as Matt Barry rightly points out here, make sure you're following Matt on Twitter, X. He does an amazing job talking about how all these mass immigration programs are not being run in the best interest of Australians. And it's great to see people like Matt that are obviously, sort of in the matrix for the most part in the business world, but they're starting to wake up to this playbook of the global cabal and the great replacement theory that I covered in detail last week. And this is particularly, apparent in New South Wales and Victoria now with everything that's going on. And particularly in the midst of this housing crisis, cost of living crisis, this story went, got trending this week with the everyday Aussie dad talking about how his rent's going up. I think it was $180 a week, whatever. That's about 10 grand a year, and pushing it back. And some of the responses, on this ABC segment were just crazy, saying, "Oh, how we need skilled migrants and blah blah blah." But that's not true. The majority of the migrants coming in aren't skilled, and we're starting to see a rise in violent crime, just as we've seen all across Europe, which we'll get to in a few segments. And with the economy starting to roll over and the US stock market really taking a hit now, Albo comes out and tells Aussies to start buying Australian made, but we know that manufacturing here has been absolutely gutted, and there's very few things that are made in Australia anymore compared to back in the 70s where people would proudly buy an Aussie made car and things like that. So once again, our leaders coming out and saying one thing, and it's just this inversion that they seem to use as their tactic, and all these distractions. But one of the good senators who's growing in popularity is Ralph Babet, and he's openly speaking about a lot of this and calling out the cabal's evil agenda, talking about how our country is just run by these puppets. They don't have your interest at heart. All these tyrants that are really pushing this agenda, really pulling the strings. And he's even calling out all of this child trafficking stuff that, as I've continued to talk about, this is really the straw that's going to break the camel's back when it comes out what's really going on with the Epstein list, the Diddy saga, and the royals, the Vatican, all these things that are slowly now becoming mainstream. So good on Senator Babet for openly calling this stuff out, and that people are waking up to the fact that the people in control are very sick people pushing an evil agenda. Over the US, where we have this judge who let a child offender out on custody, and then it came out that he himself was also arrested, and they had these chats going where they're talking about this, sick abuse of children and so on. So a lot of the judges and people in positions of power are also in on this. But we're starting to see these mass arrests take place. So 165 school employees have been arrested and sentenced so far in 2025 for these kiddie crimes as, the Great Awakening to just how rife all this pedo stuff is in all our institutions. This was the Maui police chief, John Pelletier, who was involved not only in the trapping of these victims during the fire, but he's now been named as a co-conspirator in the Diddy case. As I said, this really is the key to understanding everything. But he's also involved in the Las Vegas shooting and other incidents. So these people are in these positions of power, and this is the whole blackmail thing where they're involved and they can push the agenda of whatever the elites want. This is the co-founder of one of the pride groups in Surrey being charged with these crimes against youths. So this stuff is just, coming out everywhere, and it's great to see these arrests taking place. And I think the changes are really going to come from a state level, and this comes to so many different topics that I really think we're going to push back to local government, state government, and those people making their own decisions rather than this current system we have from those at the tippy top dictating everything. The globalists and all these NGOs that make the rules for everything from health to immigration policies and so on. But this is Oklahoma passing a bill requiring convicted, kiddie offenders here to undergo chemical castration before they can become eligible for parole. Tom Homan, who is the border czar that they're talking about here, a lot of people saying, this is closing the borders, it's so bad, they're keeping these kids from meeting their parents and so on, but we know that's not the case at all. We've got 500,000 kids that were trafficked into this country, and 300,000 of them, they don't even know where they are, if they're alive or not. And this is the big crackdown that has really been stopped this year. The numbers have plummeted dramatically since some of these operations are now in place to protect the border and expose all these child trafficking rings. Okay, so I want to get to this podcast with Tucker and Clayton Morris of Redacted. Again, it is just so amazing to see these messages getting out to millions of people that were just full on, people called you tinfoil hat, whatever, a few years ago. So they dived into everything from UFOs to the child trafficking stuff, biolabs in Ukraine, Israel, Mossad's control of the world with the CIA, and how the elites are pushing this new world order. People like George Soros with his Open Society Foundation, which we'll get to in just a second. But they dived into, again, this topic that Candace Owens covered in detail a few weeks ago, the attack on the USS Liberty, where literally, the elites knew this was going to happen. They were happy to see US soldiers, civilians, sailors die, and they knew the CIA and Israel wanted this to happen, to drag America into war, just like with 9/11, just like the playbook of passing these laws in Australia. It's the same playbook, same framework over and over again to push their agenda. They also dived into, as I mentioned, all the child trafficking and organ harvesting that's going on through Ukraine and all this stuff that's, labeled as Russian propaganda. It's like they spin the wheel to blame Russia, China, or North Korean hackers. Anyway, so this was a female arrested in Poland for selling 56 human kidneys, and this is really sick stuff that is going on in Ukraine. More and more people are waking up to this Satanism, evil agenda just hiding in plain sight, particularly in Hollywood and the music industry. And here we have Lady Gaga this week on Saturday Night Live, openly performing this, these crazy satanic rituals, with the chalices and so on. And it's just out there in the open. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. Tucker and Clayton also got into the reporting of Bridget Macron being a man recently, and Francis offered to pay Candace Owens millions of dollars and ongoing to stop reporting on this. As I said last week, they're not even denying that this is true now. They're just trying to cover it up and hide it before all the public wakes up to this fact. And this is another one, if you've been down this rabbit hole, Anderson Cooper and his brother, who supposedly committed suicide. And here we have Kathy Griffin, many people drawing the connection here. And it's part of this, club that they're in, where all these elites of Hollywood have got, all their children transgender, or someone close to them or their firstborn often dies. And they say that's kind of one of the things you've got to do to get into that club. Just crazy stuff, and people are finally joining all these dots. But let's get back into some of these, the Mossad, Israel, CIA control of these things that are finally coming out. So these are leaked documents from 2008 talking about Israel's Gaza power blockade. And we know that just last week, Israel announced that they're going to block all, food, water, power, everything, and basically now starve all the Palestinians left in there to death, which is just insane that this is allowed to happen. And Trump's, pro-Israel and talking about the real estate development there. But, hopefully more people wake up to this sooner rather than later. This is a Hillary Clinton email from 2012 where they're talking about how the collapse of Syria would be a great thing for Israel, and that's obviously now playing out. These people plan years in advance, and they're finally to the stage where they're ready to push the final chess pieces into place if we don't wake people up in time. But the good news is, if all these top podcasts around the world keep covering this stuff, the masses are going to wake up, and we're already seeing changes in plenty of states, as I've mentioned, plenty of countries, which I'll get to some more news in a second, but the Great Awakening is actually taking place. So this is a former official who's finally come out and talking about how 9/11 was a controlled demolition. Anyone that's looked into this knows it's absolutely obvious, particularly with World Trade Center Building 7 and everything that happened there. But the scary thing is just how cozy Musk and Trump with Netanyahu and Israel, talking about much appreciated here, Israel in talks to have this contract for Teslas and so on. But the scary thing that I keep talking about that must be avoided is this push for this AI surveillance and Neuralink, Elon wanting to put chips in everyone's brains. So this is the AI governance alliance, and it's not what you think at all. It's all part of this New World Order agenda that's now been rebranded as they gut the government and look to push an AI system of control. And Elon Musk is now filing trademarks for telepathy and telekinesis for Neuralink. Really scary stuff. And consider this in the context of the telepathy tapes new series that I spoke about last week, which was amazing, showing that these non-verbal autistic kids are able to communicate telepathically, even read languages that they have never been taught by tapping into, they say they're tapping into some universal information field. Those of you that have done meditation, breathwork, psychedelics or so on, you know that there's so much more to this reality than what we're being told. But this is really scary when they're pushing for all this to kind of be done digitally, transhumanism. This is an Aussie company called Cortical Labs that just launched the first commercial biological computer. So they're using human neurons directly integrated into silicon chips. This is, it's all finally coming together, guys. And again, this must be avoided. Some new terahertz light technology, insanely fast data storage, using this new ultra-fast terahertz light pulses to read magnetic data in just mere picoseconds. So we're really getting towards this exponential technology curve where it is going to surpass what's capable of humans, but we need to have this discussion about whether or not that's actually a good thing. All right, so while we do have a lot of these people in the Trump administration cozying up to Israel, we do have people like Thomas Massey that are trying to push back and not accepting funding. Now, I know there's been a lot of different rumors about him floating around as well of late, but the Trump administration has withdrawn this Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis nomination for Deputy Director of National Intelligence due to his criticisms of Israel's actions in Gaza. So Tulsi Gabbard actually selected Davis as well. So this is really sad to see when if you're sticking up or you're being anti-war, you're not allowed to be in that cabinet. And we're really living in an upside down, backwards world these days. It's all part of the satanic inversion, the agenda. And you're arrested if you're anti-war and talking about how genocide while being applauded and giving billions of dollars if you are a warmonger that's doing these crimes. All right, so let's get into George Soros and this open society. This was an amazing thread here where you can just go through country by country, the playbook, what they've done, how they've overthrown governments, how they fund these, these groups to be radicalized, to create conflict and division, and then get their way to push the agenda. We've seen the same with Zelensky. So she actually invited Marina Abramovic, who is deep into the Satanism, the spirit cooking. She's tight with all these Hollywood elites, Lady Gaga and so on. And Zelensky actually wanted her to be the ambassador, invited her to be the ambassador for rebuilding schools and supporting children, which is, just sick stuff, all part of this global network. This is the incoming president of the Olympic Committee, Sebastian Coe, who's apparently been visited Epstein Island 11 times, and we all know, the Paris Olympics and, all that opening ceremony and how satanic that all was. Again, all just part of this one big club. Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, former head of the Bank of England. Again, it's just picking from within this club, people that are tight with Epstein and Maxwell and so on. But the good news is people are waking up. All right, so over to Ireland here, where they're talking about just how terrifying this has become, where it's like we're seeing in real time this great replacement theory against Christians, whites, even just people that are native in their own countries being diluted out through immigration, destroying, history, culture, and so on. But we do have countries like Sweden that are now deporting migrants. Places like Sweden and Ireland went from some of the safest countries in the world 20 years ago to now leaders in violent crime. And if you look at the statistics, it shows disproportionately that a lot of these migrants come over, they are overrepresented in terms of committing the most violent crimes. And so places are starting to say, enough's enough. The EU leaders will say that it's the radical right-wing Swedish government that want to deport criminals. It's just common sense. If people are coming in committing violent crimes, it's time to deport them and send them back to their own countries. It's pretty simple stuff. Okay, let's get into some health news here. So, as you know, with the the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, all these big institutions that started the medical industry, the cancer industry, and so on, and then brought in these laws to make it illegal to treat cancer any other way other than their new, pharmaceuticals that they've, invented, patented, and can profit on from so on. So we have good senators like Malcolm Roberts. I know he's not perfect and he didn't vote against some of these hate speech laws, but he has been good at a number of other things. So he's calling out, how Big Pharma gets 90% of their funding from the TGA and all the corruption going on here with the COVID jabs and so on. But this is a really scary here. So this is the Trump administration talking about $500 billion in funding for AI and mRNA vaccines to cure cancer. And here we have this spill. And as always, we know that the evil elites kind of have to show you the playbook, almost like they get off on kind of hiding the truth in plain sight. And this was the plot some of you will remember from I Am Legend, where they invent a vaccine to cure cancer and ends up killing everyone on Earth. And here's the scene from the movie with the interview talking about it, and here is the scene that went on national news this week. Almost, a perfect depiction here. So keep that in mind as well as they start to push this miracle mRNA cancer cure vaccine out. This is some good stats coming out. Mike Yeadon, he's amazing, former vice president and chief scientific officer at Pfizer Global Research and Development. So very much an insider who got out of the club and has been a whistleblower ever since. This is all-cause mortality in Malaysia. Again, you see during the COVID when we had the deadly Omicron, Delta waves, Wuhan strain, whatever, and we don't have any uptick in excess mortality. And sure enough, as soon as we get the vaccine rollout, we get this absolute spike. And as I spoke about, guys, if you got the jab, a lot of those batches didn't have anything in them. And we see huge batch variability. So there's websites you can go to and you can go back to your local doctor or pharmacist where you got the jab, check the batch you got. And you might have a batch where no one got sick, there was no side effects. But if you have been not feeling well or whatever, look up that spike protein detox protocol I spoke about, where you can take N-acetylcysteine, NAC, bromelain, and nattokinase, and that helps break down the spike protein and get it out of your body along with fasting. So there are things you can do. Eat healthy, get plenty of vitamin D, just get your immune system going again. Stop eating all that junk food and that type of thing, and you'll be just fine. Okay, so this is again one of the largest medical frauds in history. Guess who's involved? Pfizer. This is Dr. Scott Rubin, a former member of Pfizer, just pleading guilty to faking dozens of research studies around Celebrex. This is similar to all those Vioxx studies, which was another anti-inflammatory, which ended up causing heart attacks. And, it's funny how all these things seem to target the heart, and that's going to be important further down the line as we get deeper into what's really going on, and the attacks on the body and the mind that the cabal are pushing. But isn't it just funny how Pfizer have won the world's most ethical company 4th year running? You can't make this stuff up. This is the satanic inversion in action here. In terms of Fauci and hopefully the prosecutions that are going to happen against him, Bill Gates and so on, this was just interesting that came out during the week with Biden's signatures with using this auto pen that might not even be valid with all those pardons that he gave that Trump spoke about. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. This is Dr. Andrew Wakefield in 1995 talking about the MMR vaccine, and he is a brilliant doctor. He is featured in the Vaxxed trilogy, if you've seen that documentary series, and he's talking about how he just wanted to investigate and seeing if what all these mothers and parents were reporting was true. And we've absolutely seen these cases where people have reverted back into autism after this shot, that kids that were progressing completely normally. And a lot of people don't even realize in 1993, Japan banned the mRNA vaccine after 1.8 million children were given this, and they had a record number of meningitis. It's these heavy metals and these adjuvants in the vaccines that cause inflammation on the brain and throughout the body. And it's good to see different countries openly getting this information out there. A lot of these studies are finally resurfacing, and the truth is getting out there. For people that want to toe the party line that vaccines have saved millions of lives or whatever, this is just grok summarizing the death rate for each of these diseases in the year the vaccine was introduced. So it's less than one child per 100,000, for all these things. So you can't make the claim that they've saved millions of lives when the time they were introduced, all these diseases were already declining. As I've mentioned, a lot of it was caused by malnutrition, environmental toxins, a number of other reasons. Your immune system in a healthy child can often fight off all these things. And measles, like we've seen, was something that was joked about back in the 60s. And now parents are terrified when they hear these words because of the triggering, the mind control, all the programming. So this is another just insane stat that's come out. Just 3 years ago, 30% of Democrats believe children should be taken away from unvaccinated parents, and now it's up to 50%. So this is what they're pushing. You can't go to school unless you have the 75 shots recommended now on the vaccine. If you're not going to give it to your kids, the authoritarian government, the elites, are going to take your children away from you if you don't want to give them these these shots. And where is your freedom? It's just really crazy how some people, the level of brainwashing. And here we have Bill Gates talking about how he wants to create AI that bans harmful speech, for example, causing people to possibly skip one of his vaccines. Senator Alex Saunders is another great one who has been pushing back against a lot of the globalist agenda, talking about how this all the climate narrative is just a Trojan horse for globalism, the UN and their puppet masters, all this alarmism and so on. Just remember how years ago it was global cooling and we're heading for an ice age, and then it was global warming, and now it's climate change, and more and more scientists that are in this field are just waking up to this stuff. This is Australia's Energy Minister talking about how our number one export is unreliable energy, traditional fossil fuel energy. Yes, I'm all for replacing that, and we don't want to pollute the environment and so on. But at the moment, it's just absolutely hurting the individual citizens and putting the costs on them. And here we have just more nonsense. Local councils considering banning gas, so you won't be have a barbecue anymore, and this type of thing. Power prices, they promised that they'd go down, and once again they're just announcing a huge increase that's going to happen, that's going to hurt everyday Aussies. The less you're earning, the lower the middle class. This is absolutely hurting you. It doesn't really hurt the elites and really high earning individuals. We also got news that water prices are going to go up 50% over the next 5 years. In a country that has abundant fresh water, abundant energy, this is all from poor policies that are deliberate from our leaders. Over to the UK now. So this is talking about the government's new planning and infrastructure bill that grants, the power for these elites like BlackRock and so on to take land, become these huge asset managers, buy land off farmers and everyday individuals, and the state is just going to come along and tell you we're seizing that farm for XYZ, for Bill Gates or BlackRock or whatever they need. All part of the Great Reset, as Malcolm Roberts is talking about here. Klaus Schwab's plan for life by subscription, where you own nothing and be happy. Britain is now openly funding these solar geoengineering. So Bill Gates has floated this idea about how we need to block out the sun to fight climate change, blah, blah, blah. And we now literally have a company, a startup called Make Sunsets, which are releasing sulfur dioxide, these reflective particles to, toxic stuff that's going into the environment. This is the real environmental crisis, all this geoengineering, cloud seeding, all these toxins. There was a report out during the week that the concentration of aluminium in bee populations is now gone up 70-fold or something ridiculous. And we've got the farmers talking about these levels in the soil. So it's so important to know how to do these detoxes and fasting and remove heavy metals from the body, eat these natural diets, stop eating this GMO-based food, that mass-produced food in the supermarkets and that type of thing. Go to your local farmer's market, your local butcher, all these types of things you're going to do to avoid all this. And most importantly, get a filter and start filtering all your water. This is another insane article here, just talking about how these lunatics that are all coming together to supposedly save the planet at this climate summit in Brazil are bulldozing thousands of acres of the Amazon rainforest to build a 4-lane highway so that they can access this climate summit. With all this going on in the UK, Europe, and globally, Keir Starmer's come out and he once again spin that wheel. Who do we blame? We're going to blame Russia, who are now menacing our skies, our water, and our streets. He's pushing the conscription, which I told you last week was coming. One of their playbooks as the Great Replacement Theory is trying to fund war and ultimately push to send young people to war. But there's absolutely no way that young people are going to comply with this. These people are absolutely kidding themselves when they're talking about conscription and sending young people to go and die over in Ukraine to fight off Russia. And the European Commission is now planning to take $10 trillion of citizens' savings for EU defence. I've spoken about plenty of times over the years the bail-in laws and how once you give a bank to your money to a bank, it's no longer your money. And they're talking about how this is great, this is much needed, and did you vote for this as an EU citizen? And the same thing is going to happen in Australia and these other countries as well until we get people in power that aren't part of this cabal. Some positive news here from South Dakota. They've passed this legislation banning the funding, production, research, sale, blah, 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 of all this fake lab-grown meat and insect-based foods with these new laws going into effect. So as I spoke about, the changes are coming from the state and the local level, and you as a consumer start to make these changes. Vote with your wallet. So this is amazing to see. Utah has become the first state to ban fluoride in drinking water. Not only is it important to get a high-quality water filter to get out fluoride, now we know that it lowers IQ in children, but just think about that effect over a lifetime, guys. And once you start filtering your water, I guarantee you will feel better and you will feel like your IQ has gone up. But not only that, it gets out all the, the pesticides, herbicides, heavy metals, other things like that as well in the water. So I can't recommend that enough, getting a high-quality water filter. I just wanted to mention this as well. The average age of farmers in Japan is 70 years old, but as the globalists are trying to roll out all this eat fake meat and, fake food agenda, this is something that I think is going to be a massive change going forward, because we see this number similar everywhere. We know our farmers work so hard, overworked, underpaid or whatever. I think we're going to see a real shift to people wanting to move out of cities, get back to local communities, start to grow their own food. I think we're going to see real support for organic farmers, organic products, and all that type of thing in the next 5 years as well. This all ties into everything that I've just spoken about, but this is a new study coming out that since the rollout of those injections, we've now got half of women in the US reaching menopause between the age of 30 and 35. And this is part of the elite's global depopulation agenda. This ties into how dramatic the drop in sperm counts has been. And, people want to bury their head in the sand, guys. But if we don't change anything within one generation, this is going to be down to 90% drop in sperm count. 90% of women going through menopause at 30. And at that point, we're talking about literally the continuation of the human species. So this stuff has to be a priority. Prioritize your health and your family's health. All right, so once again, Mike Yeadon, former vice president of Pfizer, talking about their plans and how it all ties into this agenda, where you won't be able to have private transport, this digital ID that they're rolling out, to totally enslave you and your choices. And this week we had Christine Lagarde announcing that central bank digital currencies are coming, and I think they want to launch this towards the second half of this year. They're already openly talking about rolling this out. So, if you're in Europe, again, it's time to start thinking about moving to a country that's pushing back against all these agendas as well. Klaus Schwab here talking about how we have to get used to the idea of total erosion of your privacy. If you've got nothing to hide, don't be afraid. I wish the elites would take up on that mantra. And thankfully, we do have all these documents through USAID, this army of decentralized independent researchers and journalism that is getting to the truth finally. It's really amazing to be part of this. I just want to quickly touch on smart meters. This is in a community note here saying, they're not that bad, but we've seen in a lot of these fires that have taken place around the globe where the smart meters themselves that are hardwired into the house can short circuit and cause the fire throughout the whole house. But not only that, they've actually got those 5G emitters in there. And so I had a friend during the week in Australia have someone rock up to their house and say, hey, we've got to install a smart meter. And he said, I don't want this. And the person said, the cops will be round here if you don't want it. And really put them on the back foot. And so they rang me up and I said, no way, push back on this and say you don't want it, say you'll get a lawyer. The health risks and so on. And this person's partner had actually had cancer recently. And they said, look, I don't want any of this radiation near my house. He rang up the company and they said, look, no worries. We've had heaps of people say this actually, that they don't want this smart meter and they don't want this radiation. We'll send someone out and uninstall it, guys. So know your rights, push back against this stuff, and don't be a part of this matrix system that they're pushing. Globally, with the stock market and everything happening, we're definitely seeing that start to unwind a little bit. I'm not sure if it's a controlled demolition that Trump wants or what's going on, but I've definitely gone more defensive in my traditional asset classes. Got enough risk, with the exposure to Bitcoin, a higher risk asset class. But this is the huge losses that US banks are now sitting on, nearly $500 billion. Is this going to end up with stimulus and bailouts to save them, and injection in the market and everything take off again? I'm not sure. But either way, with all this uncertainty, gold has just hit a new record high, $3,000 US. That's $4,500 in Australian dollars. This has just been on fire for those of you that have been long-term lovers of gold and silver. I think Bitcoin is going to do well. You guys know you can head over to nuggetsnews.com.au to get all our crypto research, and I'll continue to do those videos. But man, oh man, we are just living in such interesting times at the moment, and knowledge is power, guys. The key is understanding all this and then doing something about it, putting those changes in your life to not fall victim to all these systems and changes as they're rolled out and put into place. So if you're enjoying this series, please share it around with other people that you want to help wake up on their journey. Smash that like button, leave a comment below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.